Most political scandals explode like grenades, loud, immediate, impossible to ignore. This one detonated like a voice memo accidentally sent to the wrong group chat. Quiet, casual, almost stupidly ordinary. A few people sitting inside a golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Writers, publishing staff, a former president trying to sound important, papers moving across a table, nervous laughter. Then, suddenly, somewhere between the rustling of documents and Donald Trump bragging about Iran, the entire legal architecture of his defense started collapsing in real time. Because this was never supposed to become evidence. That's the part people keep missing. Donald Trump was not cornered by FBI interrogators. He wasn't under oath. He wasn't trapped inside some hostile congressional hearing room with cameras shoved into his face. He thought he was safe. He thought he was among allies. This was a memoir session connected to Mark Meadows, a friendly conversation designed to help shape history in his favor. But instead of controlling the narrative, Donald Trump accidentally narrated the prosecution's case for them. And the reason this story matters goes far beyond classified documents. Because what exploded inside that room was not just a criminal defense strategy. It was the modern political illusion that reality itself can always be negotiated away afterward. That if a recording becomes inconvenient enough, you simply scream, fake, attack the media, flood the internet with noise, and wait for your supporters to stop trusting their own ears. But here's the problem. Audio has a texture, authenticity has a rhythm, and this recording has all of it. You can literally hear Donald Trump shuffling papers. You can hear him lowering his voice as he discusses what he calls secret military material involving Iran. You can hear him say words that prosecutors at the Department of Justice must have replayed over and over like they'd just found buried treasure. As president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't. Not maybe, not allegedly, not according to anonymous sources. His own voice, his own phrasing, his own admission. That single sentence changes the gravity of the room completely. Because for months, Donald Trump publicly pushed a very different story. He claimed the boxes contained newspaper clippings, magazine articles, harmless memorabilia. He suggested everything had already been declassified anyway. Sometimes he implied presidents possess near magical authority over state secrets, as if merely thinking about declassification transforms classified intelligence into personal property. But on this tape, the performance slips. The improvisation stops for one fatal moment, and what emerges is not a man confused about classification law. It's a man acknowledging the boundary perfectly clearly before stepping over it anyway. Now pause and think about how absurd this situation really is. The federal government spent months battling over subpoenas, document requests, surveillance footage, storage rooms, moving boxes, attorney communications, and obstruction allegations surrounding Mar-a-Lago. Prosecutors built timelines. Witnesses were interviewed. Security footage was reviewed. Lawyers argued over presidential records law. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, one casual conversation at a golf club cuts through all of it like a knife through wet paper. No hostile cross-examination, no undercover operation, just Donald Trump talking too much. And this is where the story stops being embarrassing and starts becoming prosecutorial, because criminal investigations are not built on vibes. They are built on intent, state of mind, knowledge, awareness. Prosecutors do not just need to show that classified material existed, they need to show the person holding it understood what it was, understood the rules surrounding it, and understood they no longer had the authority to possess or distribute it. That's the battlefield. That's the entire battlefield. And Donald Trump, sitting inside his own golf club surrounded by memoir staffers, appears to walk directly onto that battlefield and plant the government's flag himself. Listen carefully to the sequence because the order matters. Donald Trump does not say, "I think this might still be classified." He doesn't say, "I'm not sure." He doesn't claim confusion. He specifically references a military plan connected to Iran. He specifically attributes it to the Department of Defense and General Mark Milley. Then comes the line prosecutors must absolutely love. As president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't. That sentence contains past authority, present limitation, and implied awareness all wrapped into one devastating admission. That is not a slip-up. That is cognitive recognition. And suddenly the public narrative Donald Trump spent months constructing begins tearing apart at the seams. Because outside that room, he was selling a completely different reality. On television, at rallies, through social media posts written in all caps, Donald Trump repeatedly insisted there was nothing serious in those boxes. Sometimes he described the contents as personal keepsakes. Other times he dismissed them as press clippings and magazines. Then came the broader argument that everything had already been automatically declassified anyway, a moving target, constantly changing. Whatever explanation seemed politically useful in that exact moment. But the Bedminster tape introduces a brutal legal problem for that strategy. You cannot simultaneously claim there were no classified documents while also privately discussing how you no longer possess the power to declassify the document sitting in front of you. Both realities cannot coexist. One of them collapses under the weight of the other. And here's where the absurdity becomes almost darkly comedic. Donald Trump's strongest political skill has always been flooding the zone with noise, deny, redirect, attack the messenger, create 10 explanations before fact-checkers can fully dismantle the first one. It works in politics because politics often rewards emotional loyalty over consistency, but federal criminal cases operate differently. Courtrooms are slow, methodical, ruthlessly linear. Contradictions don't disappear because they are shouted over louder. They sit there like fingerprints under ultraviolet light, waiting for prosecutors to point at them one sentence at a time. Receipt number 1. June 2023 indictment from Special Counsel Jack Smith alleging unlawful retention of national defense information. Receipt number 2. Audio recorded during a 2021 Bedminster meeting involving publishing personnel without security clearances. Receipt number 3. Donald Trump acknowledging on tape that the material remained secret after leaving office. Receipt number 4. Public statements, later denying documents even existed. Stack them together and the logic pressure becomes suffocating. And think about the people in that room for a second. These were not generals preparing wartime operations. These were writers assembling a memoir, publishing consultants, ghostwriting staff, people there to help craft image and legacy. Yet somehow the conversation drifts into discussion of military attack plans against Iran, like someone casually pulling fireworks out at a backyard barbecue to impress friends after a few drinks. That's what makes the tape feel so unsettling. Not panic, not secrecy, casualness. And that casualness becomes even more dangerous once the panic campaign begins afterward. Because the moment portions of the Bedminster audio reached the public through CNN and other reporting, Donald Trump did what he almost always does when confronted with recorded reality. He didn't carefully explain the context. He didn't calmly clarify the timeline. He launched a full-scale war against the legitimacy of the recording itself. Suddenly the tape was fake. The media was corrupt. The Justice Department was interfering in the election. The leak was illegal. The audio was manipulated. The entire machine activated instantly like muscle memory. But then Donald Trump made the mistake that may have turned a damaging story into a catastrophic one. He got too specific. Instead of simply denying the interpretation of the tape, he started constructing an alternate explanation for what people were hearing. He claimed there were no classified documents present at all. According to Donald Trump, the sounds listeners interpreted as military records and briefing papers were supposedly newspaper articles, magazine clippings, harmless stacks of paper being waved around dramatically while he talked. Then came another pivot. Maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe he was performing. Maybe he was pretending to possess sensitive material just to sound powerful in front of the memoir writers. Think carefully about how insane that defense actually is, because it asks the public to choose between two deeply disturbing possibilities. Either Donald Trump knowingly displayed classified military material after leaving office, or a former president of the United States casually invents fake national security scenarios in private conversations because he enjoys sounding dangerous and important. That's not exoneration. That's a psychological fork in the road where both exits look terrible. But the real disaster hadn't arrived yet. The real disaster arrived when Donald Trump attacked the editing of the leaked tape. He pointed to transcript gaps. He accused media outlets of slicing the audio apart to remove context that supposedly cleared him. He told supporters the public was hearing a manipulated version designed to frame him politically. In normal political media warfare, that strategy often works because most audiences never see raw source material. They see clips, headlines, fragments filtered through cable news. Donald Trump was gambling on that exact information environment again. And then the unthinkable happened. The people connected to the memoir operation around Mark Meadows effectively detonated the argument themselves by allowing the full unedited recording to emerge. Not a polished excerpt, not a selective montage. The entire conversation, continuous, raw, meandering. And instead of rescuing Donald Trump, the extended tape actually deepened the damage because listeners could now hear the relaxed atmosphere surrounding the conversation. There was no missing punchline, no hidden clarification, no moment where Donald Trump says he was joking, no evidence that CNN had twisted the meaning. The longer version simply gave prosecutors more runway. That's the moment this story transforms from legal scandal into something almost Shakespearean. Because Donald Trump's defense did not collapse under pressure from political enemies alone. It partially collapsed because insiders around his own orbit refused to carry the burden of his denial campaign for him. The memoir team suddenly faced a choice: allow themselves to be branded as fabricators participating in some deep state media conspiracy, or release the raw material and protect their own credibility. They chose self-preservation, and that decision exposed something terrifying about modern politics. We are now living in an era where even direct recordings of public figures are treated as negotiable reality. Millions of people heard Donald Trump's voice and still immediately searched for permission not to believe it. Not because the audio was unclear, not because experts disputed authenticity, but because the psychological need to preserve political identity had become stronger than the evidence entering their own ears. And that is the real crime scene hidden underneath the classified documents case. Not just boxes at Mar-a-Lago, not just storage rooms, surveillance footage, subpoenas, or obstruction allegations. The deeper story is the slow corrosion of a society's relationship with recorded truth itself. Because once a political movement trains itself to automatically reject audio, video, documents, testimony, and physical evidence whenever those things become inconvenient, the legal system starts drifting toward paralysis. A courtroom cannot function if every fact instantly becomes optional. Think about the chain reaction this creates. Investigative journalists spend months authenticating recordings, confirming witnesses, verifying chain of custody, and cross-checking transcripts, only to be dismissed as conspirators the moment the evidence damages someone powerful. Prosecutors build timelines and gather physical proof, only to watch entire sections of the public wave everything away as fake before hearings even begin. Future jurors enter the system already conditioned to distrust institutions more than evidence itself. The process doesn't merely damage one case involving Donald Trump. It weakens the operating assumptions underneath democratic accountability altogether. And this is where the moral contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Because ordinary Americans do not get this luxury. A Navy analyst cannot walk out of a secure facility carrying classified attack plans and later explain, "Well, technically, I used to have authority over those files." An intelligence contractor cannot wave secret military documents around in front of memoir writers and then claim the papers were probably magazines. A low-level federal employee would be handcuffed, interrogated, financially destroyed, and publicly humiliated before sunset. Careers would vanish overnight. Security clearances would evaporate instantly. Families would be ruined. The system becomes merciless the moment regular people touch national defense information improperly. But when power enters the equation, suddenly the conversation changes. Suddenly everything becomes philosophical, semantics, media bias, editing disputes, political persecution. And that double standard is exactly why this story matters beyond party loyalty. Because laws either remain laws when they become politically painful, or they slowly mutate into suggestions for ordinary citizens while becoming negotiable for powerful ones. That's why the Bedminster tape feels so haunting, not because it contains cinematic espionage music or some dramatic confession shouted into a microphone. It's haunting because of how normal it sounds. A former president casually discussing military secrets while aides and writers sit around listening like they're hearing backstage gossip after dinner. The ordinary tone makes the extraordinary behavior feel even more reckless, like watching someone smoke beside leaking gas and laughing while holding the lighter. And maybe the most revealing part of all is what Donald Trump never says on that tape. He never says the documents were already declassified. He never says the material is harmless. He never says the papers are fake. Those defenses appeared later, after the recording became public, after lawyers entered the picture, after political survival instincts kicked in. In the room itself, in the unguarded moment, the language is completely different. That difference matters. Because spontaneous speech often reveals reality before strategy has time to edit it. So now the country sits in a strange and dangerous place. The tape exists. The voice is recognizable. The statements are public. The contradictions are documented. and yet millions of people will still choose whichever version of reality protects their political identity best. That may be the most important warning hidden inside this entire scandal. The survival of democratic systems does not only depend on laws or elections, it depends on whether citizens are still capable of hearing evidence without first asking permission from tribal loyalty. So I want to leave you with one question. If a full, unedited recording of a former president discussing secret military material is no longer enough to establish basic shared reality in America, then what evidence possibly could be? If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because the deeper these stories go, the more important it becomes to preserve the record before the noise buries it completely.